All right. Today we are releasing a special investigation into the embezzlement of funds related to the Youth, Adult, and Displaced Workers programs. These are programs that were funded by the U.S. Department of Labor and administered by Iowa Workforce Development. So it flows from the federal government to the state government and then to a subrecipient. In this case, that was Central Iowa Workforce Development Board, who then contracted with the Children and Families of Iowa. The CFI director for this program was Jody Sparger Tate. She was responsible for things like making purchases to support the program, office supplies, equipment, those kinds of things, as well as purchases made on behalf of program recipients, participants. So this is a program that's oriented around making sure that people have job training opportunities and pathways to success and prosperity. And they are going to, as a part of the program, have job pathways put together for them that's trying to help them get to a certain place where their lives are more functional, more standardized, where they are employed, where they have the things they need to be able to get to their job, get home again, and live their life. So Ms. Sparger Tate would occasionally make purchases, the program should make purchases, that are oriented around these people's job training programs. Every person has a specific program for a path that they are on. She then would be reimbursed using those federal funds and other funding sources like CFI's foundation. Our investigation uncovered improper reimbursements to Mrs. Sparger Tate of more than $430,000 over the course of 7 years. I'll say that one over again. Our investigation uncovered improper reimbursements to Mrs. Sparger Tate to the tune of about $430,000 over 7 years. Most of that, about $320,000, was improperly reimbursed to herself, and then there was about another $100,000 that was diverted to her family members for things like rent, utilities, cell phone service, and in addition to that, allegedly for daycare expenses when there was in fact no daycare being provided. As you'll see in the report, the discovery of this program is actually a classic story of how these kinds of frauds get discovered. Mrs. Sparger Tate took vacation. Someone else had to step in and do her job while she was gone. While that other person was doing that job, a reimbursement came in for a person's job plan for a participant in the program. And the person who was handling Mrs. Sparger Tate's duties knew that that person didn't have a car, but yet this was for auto body and auto mechanical work. And so it raised suspicions at CFI that something was going on here that wasn't right. That person then brought those concerns to leadership at CFI. CFI leadership helped review more in depth. They then notified Iowa Workforce Development that they had a concern. CFI hired a private CPA firm to investigate. They notified our office. After reviewing that CPA firm's report, they then asked us to do additional procedures. And so in September of 2023, they requested us to do those additional procedures, and we put that in our long line of things to do. Two things that are worth noting here. Again, part of this goes to the importance of oversight and making sure that people feel like someone is watching them. For 5 of the last 6 years, our office's audit of Iowa Workforce Development told them they needed to be doing more subrecipient monitoring. That is this work. We had been asking them for 6 years to go back and be looking more closely at the people who were getting these funds to make sure that there was a sense of oversight and that they were paying attention to how these dollars were being spent. These were not concerns that were specific to CFI. They were in general for most grants. But the point is, this was an area that the auditor's office warned wasn't up to the legal standards, and Iowa Workforce Development was aware of that. I also do want to say, to Iowa Workforce's development credit, they did over the course of those years make progress, right? It's not that they were doing nothing, but still at the end of the day, it took quite some time for us to get to the point where those findings have been reduced in their scope, and that was only just this year. I also want to add another piece of context here. Iowa Workforce Development, probably more than any other entity, had their entire world turned around because of the pandemic. If you remember, it started earlier for them and went longer because of all of the changes in unemployment benefits. And so our office has been working so closely with them for years. I really do want to specifically give credit to one of our auditors, Jamie Reuter. Jamie has worked on that audit for years. He worked on it through the pandemic. It was incredibly difficult, incredibly complicated, and I do think that during that time, um, good efforts were being made by all parties to try to adapt to the changes due to the pandemic. At the same time, the bottom line is there's never any excuse for not making sure that there is enough oversight. We have to be doing this kind of subrecipient monitoring, and if we're not, this is the kind of thing that results when people don't have a sense of oversight for how the money is getting spent. I think that's all I need to hit. Who has questions about any of this? Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Can you walk me through the period that this investment took place? You said a period of 7 years.
Right. She was hired in 2015. We have a couple of questions about disbursements from 2015, many more from 2016. And so it was in 2022 when she was on vacation that someone else was taking over her duties and noticed what they thought looked very suspicious, like very suspicious payments. It's also worth noting that this is one of those things that's really important. In fact, in the banking world, there are federal regulations requiring employees to take vacation for precisely this reason, because when someone else comes in for a week to do your job for you, all of a sudden you don't have the keys to the kingdom anymore. And that sort of thing, knowing that you're going to have to take that vacation, knowing that someone else is going to do your job, is exactly the kind of oversight that I'm talking about, where people are then required to leave, and it's going to help deter them from doing things they know they shouldn't do, because they know that there's going to be this window where someone else can more easily discover what's going on. Yeah, so the way this worked is there was a check that came in that was assigned to a particular participant's work plan, right? So all of these people, they kind of look where they're at life, they have conversations with them about where they want to go, and they put together a plan for them. And this was a person who, the substitute employee that was stepping into Sparger Tate's shoes, they knew that program participant. They knew that they didn't have a car. And so when they were processing the mail that day and they saw a reimbursement check come in that was supposed to be for auto work for someone that they knew didn't have a car, it raised the alarm bell for them, right? And let's give credit to that person too, right? It's easy in this sort of situation to say CFI wasn't doing their job, IWD wasn't doing their job. We also have one person at CFI who said something when they saw something, which is what we always ask people to do. They realized this doesn't look right. And instead of sort of ignoring it or just saying, I don't want to have to deal with whatever that is, they brought their concern to administrators. The administrators, to their credit, also looked in and found out what was going on.
So I covered this
Mm-hmm.
Is this organization what followed that?
The larger one, Central Iowa Workforce Development Board, I can't say with certainty. To some degree, yes, because you have someone who's taking that money and handing it out to family members. So Mrs. Sparger Tate was paying rent for her son to the tune of about a little shy of $10,000. She was paying the cell phone bills for multiple members of her family to the tune of about $10,000. Paying utilities for members of her family to the tune of about $6,000. And then in addition to that, D.D. Millard was a family member of Mrs. Sparger Tate. She was the recipient of nearly $80,000 in payments for daycare, when there was no reason that D.D. Millard would be paid for daycare through this program. Yes. We have sent it to the Attorney General's office. We have sent it to the County Attorney's office. I can't tell you today if we've sent it to the feds. It's obviously federal dollars, so I would assume that they would have an interest in it as well. No. And again, I think part of what is important here is emphasizing 5 of 6 years we've been asking IWD, hey, you've got to be looking more closely at the recipients of these grants. And here we are today talking about exactly the kind of thing that results when people don't feel like anybody's looking very closely.
Was she, rated
Yeah. At the time that it was discovered.
Put this investment context of other
This would, I think, be the 4th largest under my time in the office, just in terms of the total of misspent money, whether or not it's criminally charged. So if you want to just give it a misspent money title. Workday, there was a Iowa or Metro Waste Authority, right? And then the physics department from last year. Yeah. Physics department, University of Iowa, about $1 million. The legislative oversight committees have met between the 2 houses combined on average for half an hour a year to do any oversight at all of state government. We do plenty of stuff on local government. Thanks.